If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10, broadcasting on Channels Television live from Lagos. And here are some of the pictures that you sent in using our eyewitness portal. First is this picture of a makeshift bridge on Bama Road in Adamawa State, built by members of the community. Our eyewitness reporter says that the previous bridge collapsed, leaving this one as the only option for commuters. Our reporter is pleading with the concerned parties to pay attention to the bridge to end the risk people take driving on it. Next is this picture of the dilapidated Nekede Road in Owerri, Imo State. Our eyewitness reporter, who says that this road poses a great risk to motorists plying it, is calling the attention of relevant authorities to fix it. Finally, is this picture of Idundu Road in Calabar, the Cross River State capital. Our eyewitness reporter, who tags it a terrible nightmare, blames the ugly state of the road on the unfinished job by a contractor. Our reporter is seeking help from the government. I want to thank you so much indeed for sending these pictures and ask that you keep them coming. The Kaduna Refining and Petrochemical Company, KRPC, has resumed refining of petroleum products at 60% installed capacity. This is coming 8 months after it stopped operations due to lack of crude oil and outdated facilities. The company's managing director, engineer Saidu Muhammad, says that the commencement of the production followed the successful completion of turnaround maintenance of the plants by local engineers, which lasted for 18 months. Channels Television's crew was at the refinery.
The sound, fire, and smoke coming out of these plants are signs of resumption of production activities in the Kaduna Refinery. On the other side, petroleum tankers are already lined up to commence lifting of refined products. The last time the plant was in operation was in January 2015, after which they were shut down. The Kaduna Refinery presently refines about 36,000 barrels of crude, and the management of the refinery is optimistic that the plant will produce more.
60% of 60,000, that's about 36,000 barrels per day of crude oil today. That is what we are running on today. It's not that we cannot go beyond 60%. Get it clear, we can, but then can we sustain it? The answer is no. We know that there are certain critical equipment that may fail when you push them further. And those are the equipment that we have already gone far in the procurement. So today we produce about 1 million point, some 1.6 or so of PMS, and about that same quantity of AGO, and then about 700,000 liters of kerosene. And that is what we are doing today. But that is not the optimum. Like I said, I mean, when we are back really full swing, 80 to 90%, we want to see this refinery producing not less than 4 million liters per day of PMS.
Despite the resumption of operations in Kaduna and Port Harcourt refineries, the long queues are yet to disappear completely in most parts of the north. And the residents express their views on this.
If what we heard, that the productions now are going to be for local consumption, I think in no distant time from now, anything called queue will be a thing of the past.
So we've seen some significant improvement in terms of supplies. If you go to filling stations, you see few filling stations having supplies. But today, you have major filling stations having supply. But the problem is, even at that, we still have queues.
Revamping refineries across the country is one way of ensuring an end to petroleum importation and scarcity.
And joining me from our studio in Abuja to discuss the crisis of the fuel supply in the country is Professor of Finance, Professor Osita Chukwulo-Bilu. I want to thank you so much indeed for joining us on the news at 10. 3 refineries in the country have now resumed production of petroleum products, though in varying capacities, I can imagine. How much difference do you think this will make on the face of the incessant fuel shortages that we've experienced lately?
Thanks so much. There is that this is going to bring a huge relief to our people. If Kaduna has been out of production for, did I hear the MD, 18 months, during which time production was taken out of circulation. Obviously, the refinery going back into production will ensure that there is increased supply, and that no doubt will bring a lot of relief to our people. We've had some of your audience, the people you interviewed, make that same point. So I believe that this will come as a huge relief to our people. But it has to be said that 60% production capacity is still quite low. We have to obviously congratulate the management for ensuring that that level of production is restored. But they ought to be pushing to 90%, as he said, fairly quickly, because the problem of shortage of fuel across the country is the problems it imposes to motorists, to households, to industrialists are all very obvious for everyone to know in the country.
Now, who do you think should handle this business of oil refining? Should the government, for instance, hand over these facilities to private business owners? Will this improve?
I believe at the time these refineries were built, I think Port Harcourt was built in 1989, Kaduna in 1980, and if you go back to Warri and the first thing of the Port Harcourt, a little bit back in 60s or 50s. At that point, there is no doubt that the thinking was that the government should be able to provide these facilities. But 30 years on, it has been shown quite clearly that government is not, the public sector is not suited to engage in commercial activities. Very often the will to invest in these resources are not there. There is, if you like, competing needs for resources in the public sector. There is competing need for education, health, road construction, and so on and so forth. Areas that, if you like, the public sector should be focusing on. Crude oil refining should essentially be, if you like, domiciled in the private sector. And I believe that once the right privatization framework is in place, you will have enough private capital coming in to take over these refineries, make the necessary investment that is required to ensure that they operate efficiently and at full capacity. So yes, I think at the time they were built, there might have been a case for having them domiciled in the public sector. But 30, 40 years on, the world has changed, and Nigeria is changing too. We have privatized some of the facilities that used to be owned by the public sector in Nigeria. And I think it's now, the time is now right to move privatization a lot further in the country, and I believe the refineries will be a good candidate for that.
With the 4 refineries that we have functioning now, some of them at above 60%, some at 60% capacity, do you feel that this is enough to service the local needs and consumption in Nigeria, or will we need to go to 100% first?
I think it comes back to the point I made earlier. If you look at when the last refinery was built in Nigeria, I believe that was Port Harcourt, built in 1989, Port Harcourt 1980, and the first of the Port Harcourt 1963, and then Warri 50-something. Since then, Nigeria has moved on. The economy has expanded. A lot more people use cars. Industries are coming up. And all of these need fuel, petroleum, various petroleum products. And therefore, the issue of adding capacity is very critical. Demand is increasing. Supply capacity has remained static. And if anything, have actually fallen when the refineries are operating at below capacity. So there is no doubt that there is a need to add more capacity. And I believe it's the private sector that ought to be encouraged, probably licensed, more private companies licensed to bring in some additional capacity into this sector. I don't hear that the federal government is thinking of building more refineries. I know that Anambra State government is pushing towards building a refinery at some point, probably within the next 1.5 years. But there is a need for, more capacity coming into the sector. Nigerian economy cannot be held hostage to lack of this capacity.
I want to thank you so much indeed, Professor Osita Chugulobelu, a professor of finance. I want to thank you so much indeed for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you.
And on a rather sad note, the Borno state government has announced the death of the Deputy Governor Alhaji Zana Mustafa. A statement sent to Channels Television today says that he died in his sleep this morning in Yola, Adamawa State, where he was to attend the convocation of Modibo Adama University of Science and Technology. He was also scheduled to follow up on his earlier visit to Yola to check the welfare of internally displaced citizens in Borno State as a result of the Boko Haram insurgency. His remains have arrived in the government house, Maiduguri, much earlier today. The statement, the governor said that he is deeply saddened by the loss, and he expresses his condolence to the family of his deputy and the entire people of Borno State. The Committee of Chief Medical Doctors of Federal Tertiary Hospitals has appealed to striking resident doctors in 42 tertiary hospitals across the country to return to work. Chairman of the committee, Mr. Peter Alabi, told Channels Television after a closed-door meeting in Abuja that industrial action has affected the hospitals as majority of them are unable to perform optimally. Mr. Alabi, who is also the Chief Medical Director of the University of Abuja Teaching Hospital, also affected by the strike, said that the government is already taking steps to address their demands.
As it is now, we ordinarily cannot do, the quantum of work that we used to do if everybody was on ground. So we have limited the scope. Most of the things that we do now are limited to running at outpatient clinics and a few emergency surgeries. There is a commitment on the part of government, as evidenced by the letter transmitted to all the CMDs and MDs by the Permanent Secretary of the Federal Ministry of Health, that provisions will be made for this new salary structure in the 2016 appropriation bill. And based on that, we are, requesting that all hospitals where resident doctors have been on strike to look at the advances that have been made by government and the commitment that have been made by government that whatever their demands are, they'll be fully made up for in the 2016 budget. And using that means we are calling on them to consider it and calling off the strike so that full clinical services can be restored in our hospitals. The committee urges government to expedite the release of funds using mechanisms available to her, including but not restricted to supplementary budget, to address the financial exigency. We appeal to the Federal Ministry of Health to urgently coordinate other relevant government agencies to put in place appropriate instruments that will ensure seamless accommodation of the financial implication of keeping on commerce in the 2016 personnel budget appropriation, the process of which is around the corner.
When the News at 10 returns, Dr. Moronkola Kolade, a resident doctor's crisis, he talks deeper into what the way forward is. Stay with us.